Thank you. Please proceed.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to testify. I've been here since 7:30 this morning. I drove down here from upstate New York because I am a clear picture of what you're looking at if you decide to pass this bill. And I have to tell you that for my family, it has been devastating. I've heard a lot of people sit up here and talk about if you pass the bill, they're going to move or they're going to choose to homeschool or whatever. Well, my family couldn't afford to move. And as a result of that, I now have 3 children. When they were kicked out of school, they were 13, 10, and 5, but we've had 2 birthdays, so they're 14, 11, and 5 now. So I have 3 children whom my husband and I leave home every day because we have to go to work because we can't afford to live off of one income. And my 14-year-old is responsible for the education of her younger siblings while she's trying to get her own education. And it's not right and it's not fair. And I had legislators that told me prior to the passing of the bill, you know, your kids will be able to get medical exemptions based on the issues that they had. I told them, no, they're not going to be able to get medical exemptions in New York State because I already know that doctors won't even see my children. They don't care why they're unvaccinated. They don't care that they have health issues. They don't care that we have morals and values. And what kind of country do we want without morals and values that are based on people's religious principles? I sat here and I listened to your commissioner talk about not wanting to drag up the past. Well, how are we unburying the bones of segregation and discrimination? It's not right. I took my children to the African American Museum over the summer, and my daughter looked at the pictures because they passed the bill in June. And my daughter looked at the pictures and she said, Mom, how is this any different? I've spent my life telling my kids that your education is important because people fought and they died for your right to have an education. For them to now be denied an education, and then on top of it, to add insult to injury. I don't know which one of you it was who asked about the process of them being kicked out of school and being removed. It was devastating, and I now have an open CPS case because I wanted to fight for my children to be able to get an education. So instead of the school district agreeing to meet with me, they called CPS and filed educational neglect charges against me. So we're talking about delicate situations. You don't know each individual's family's case, and you can't. You can't know it until it happens, and then you have people sitting in the seat like mine. I have a sister-in-law who has my niece. My sister-in-law's blind. My niece is home now being educated by my blind sister-in-law who lost her son last year to cancer. So this is what it looks like on the other side of passing this bill. There has to be another way. And I really hope somebody asks me about what happened as far as the medical exemptions go.
Thank you very much. Are there questions or comments? Senator Anwar.
Could you tell us about the medical exemptions? What happened?
Yes, so my son has arthritis. He's got rheumatoid arthritis. And his rheumatologist has already agreed that if he receives more vaccination, it's likely to cause more damage. My son is one of those kids that their treatment for the arthritis is to give him chemotherapy. So their solution is for me to get him, to put him on chemotherapy, and then they are willing to give him a medical exemption. They will not give me a medical exemption so that I can continue to protect his joints, which I've been able to do absent of the chemo. I put him on a vegan, holistic diet because as parents, that's what we do. You find out your kid has a problem, you research it, you try the least invasive way possible to fix it. That is what I did. My son went from not being able to run or play and being in pain all day to scoring 28 points in his basketball games because I did my own research and fed him to good health. And instead of them giving me a medical exemption to keep his system from inflammation, they would rather I give him the vaccines, then put him on chemo, and then they give me a medical exemption for his immune compromised situation. And then the last thing I just want to say is I've got 3 kids who are all in years of graduation. One graduating from kindergarten, one supposed to graduate from elementary school, and one supposed to graduate from middle school. And none of them are able to attend their graduations. They don't get that back. And as their parent, I don't get that back.
Senator Armour, did you have anything else? Or? Other questions or comments? Representative Candeloro.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your testimony. I think one of the pieces that you've brought to us is the education piece. You know, we didn't hear from the Commissioner of Education. We haven't heard from any education experts. And so I think many of us are struggling with the back end of this. It's easy to say, let's remove a religious exemption, and people try to struggle for the medical. So from the educational component, did you try to bring your children to school?
So my children I stuck them in school initially, and then I stuck them in school for the purpose of, because they had already removed the religious exemption. So I stuck them in while I was trying to get a medical exemption for all of their issues. So after their nurse practitioner that's been treating them for 5 years, she wrote up a medical exemption, but she could not get the doctors in her practice to sign it, nor could I get any doctors to treat them. So once the school found out that I could not get the medical exemption that she wrote signed up, they told me that they couldn't come back anymore. And so I wasn't able to bring them anymore. Then the school started sending me documentation telling me I had to sign withdrawal forms. I told them I don't want to sign withdrawal forms because I'm not withdrawing them from school. You're kicking them out. You're telling me that they can't come. Ultimately, they told me that if I did not sign the withdrawal forms, that they were going to call, there were threats of CPS. So I signed the forms, but on the forms I wrote, I'm not withdrawing my kids, you're kicking them out of school. And I turned those documentation in. Then I repeatedly asked for a meeting with the school because I wanted to find out how they could help me in educating my kids, because I'm tired. I'm working 8 hours a day, then I'm trying to figure out their education, then I've got my own health issues. I'm tired. So I wanted to find out how the school district could help me in educating my kids. They would not return my phone calls. They wouldn't schedule a meeting with me, which I asked for. I didn't want to turn in a letter of intent to homeschool because my intent was not to homeschool. It was to get the free and public education that they're supposed to be able to get. But because I did not turn in the letter of intent, the school district then called social services and called CPS. And then next thing I know, I've got CPS at my door, and now I have an open case that I have to fight, in addition to all of the rest of this stuff that I now have to report to them and try and figure out a solution, which now I had to turn in the letter of intent, which I did, but I put on it that I'm doing this under duress. This is not free will. And now, as a result of that, I lose all right to once you turn in your letter of intent, you lose all right to any educational resources at all. None, zero. And then on top of it, you're a homeschooled child in New York State they don't get a diploma. They don't count a homeschooled person going through school. It doesn't matter what the program is. They do not count that as being worthy of receiving a high school diploma.
I thank you for giving us this information, because I think it's something that this committee needs to struggle with and come to terms with and recognize the impact of this legislation. It goes far beyond the religious exemption. So thank you so much for sharing your time and putting a face to this issue.
Thank you. Representative Zupkis?
Thank you so much for coming. You actually made me cry. I have a question. In New York, do they have a board? Because this piece of legislation creates a council. Is that the case in New York, where these exemptions could go before that council and be reviewed?
You mean the medical exemptions or like a religious exemption?
Well, yes.
I'm to be honest with you, I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything of any council. I know as far as the medical exemptions go, if you get it, it goes to the school, and then the school sends it to the Department of Health to get the approval. But as far as a religious exemption, I don't think there was a council per se.
Okay.
They just
And maybe this is a question for the chairs, just really quickly. This council that's being created, will they be reviewing, so if the doctor gives me a medical exemption, they could override that? How is that working?
That's certainly not what we have envisioned in this legislation. They are a monitoring body that's going to look at how the law is being implemented and make recommendations to DPH and the legislature if they think changes ought to be made. They're not going to be looking at individual medical records. They're not going to be overruling anybody's decisions. That's not their job.
So just so I'm clear, so they will not have any jurisdiction, for lack of a better term, over any medical exemption for any family or student?
Correct, as it's currently written, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again for coming.
Senator Summers, I think you were next. Did you have a?
It's late. I want to personally thank you for driving all the way from New York to testify here today. Your story is very powerful, it's enlightening, and I would like to know if before New York got rid of the religious exemption, did you have a religious exemption for your family?
So my 5-year-old, who is the only one out of the 3 of my children who is completely unvaccinated and the only one who has no health issues, she went to school on a religious exemption. She went to preschool. My older 2 were homeschooled because we moved to New York from Pennsylvania because my son had a lot of health issues, and the area that we moved to, the middle schools and stuff weren't good, and I had a job that I could work from home at that time. And so they were homeschooled. But in preparation, because New York State was changing my job, in preparation for my job, we moved into a school district to enroll them in school. So they had, my 2 oldest ones were not on anything at that time because they were at home. But when we moved into the district in April, then the plan was to put them on a religious exemption. But my 5-year-old was on a religious exemption. But also the diagnosis of the arthritis for both my son and my oldest daughter came during the summer of the summer after this bill passed.
Okay, so even though rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease, you were still not able to get a medical exemption.
I was not, and up until this point have still not. And in fact, in working, because now CPS is involved in my case and the school district is trying to help out, the school district called me the other day to tell me about a health care practitioner that they found that were willing to take my kids on and to review their case for the medical exemption. I called that health practice, and they said under no terms will they see any children that are not 100% vaccinated at all.
That seems to be something that we've heard recurring throughout the testimony today, conflicting but recurring, that clinicians are not comfortable with maybe writing a medical exemption. They're not comfortable with children that are not vaccinated. I've actually had people in my district come to me that pediatricians will no longer see them
Yes.
if they are not vaccinated. And I think your testimony is very, very, do we need help? Okay. Important because it shows what can happen to families, and this is an unintended consequence that perhaps nobody up here is thinking about.
Absolutely.
And do we need to call? I know, but do we need to call 911, not a nephrologist? Okay. I'm sorry, it looks like
That's
there's
okay.
something going on. And I don't know if I should continue, but I will. So I think that's important. I also want to remind people that our entire United States history is based in religious freedom. That's why people left England to come here to practice their religion freely. This is really borderline, absolutely looking at compromising that founding mission of people that risked their lives to come to this country. So please keep that in perspective when we're debating this bill. We've heard that over and over tonight about people's religious freedoms from whether it's a rabbi or a priest, and I think that's something that needs to be protected. And I want to welcome you to come to Connecticut if this bill does not go anywhere.
My oldest daughter, the 14-year-old, she so badly wants to play basketball at UConn. And this was her first year in 8 years, her first season that she was not able to play basketball. My husband is 6'9", so she literally has been training since birth to get the same scholarship that he got. He came over here from Liberia, a refugee of war, and got a scholarship to play. And her dream has been to play for UConn. So yeah, we have stake here as well because I want to make sure that her dreams are for her a reality.
Well, I hope she gets to play basketball on some awesome team someday.
Thank you.
Too. And I lost my train of thought here, but I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. It's been a long night or a long day, but thank you for coming. And thank you for your daughter for homeschooling your younger children. I know it must be a tough situation. One of the things also we heard, I just remembered, is that many of the folks that are faced with this, perhaps this bill goes in as written, they can't afford to stay home and homeschool those children. We all know how expensive Connecticut is. They're not comfortable they can't leave their child alone. So we're going to have to think of those unintended consequences also. And are your children allowed to partake in organized sports because they're not vaccinated now, or is that off the table also?
They can participate for like my son. He was able to play in his CYO team that my husband coaches out of the Boys and Girls Club. But for my daughter, because she's 8th grade, during this past season, there wasn't anything for her to participate in because all of the kids are in school participating in their school activities. And the other thing that is necessary to remember, like you said, as far as the rabbis go, this is a real conviction for us. I'm a Christian. There's a scripture in the Bible that says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. And what they're asking us to do is to deny our sound mind and to sacrifice our children on an altar of fear. And that's what we're not willing to do.
So we have a situation where we have forced parents in this particular case to make the choice between sometimes going to work and homeschooling. We've taken kids out of their social environment of their school. We've prevented them from participating in sports. We're isolating, we're discriminating. We're doing all these things in the name of public health where we have not yet proven that there is a public health threat.
No, and in fact, we're declining in moral health by doing so.
Thank you very much for being here tonight, and I hope
Thank
you have
you
a
for
very
having
safe
me.
ride home.
Thank you.
Representative McCarty?
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also wanted to add my comments, and thank you so much for the initiative to come here and to give us your concerns and your insight. But I asked a question earlier because not only are you now forced to be homeschooling, but has the department in New York, the education department, given any guidance to you as to testing? I know many of the schools, to go on to college particularly, they have state assessments and testing. And how was that handled in your case?
They called CPS on me. That's the only assistance that they've given me. Nothing. And I've called and I've asked. I've called and I've asked. I've sent letters to the Board of Health. To the Board of Education. There's nothing. They will give us nothing. Zero. And it says so in their statutes that we are not entitled to All I asked the school for was, can you give me the same laptop that she was using already? Because now they have to do online programming because I'm not going to be home. They took the laptop that she was using in school that they issue to all of the kids. They won't give textbooks. They won't give this online curriculum that the kids use. The teachers record a lot of their classes online. I said, in the event that I'm able to get her medical exemption cleared, can she continue with the online stuff? Everything was no, 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 and no. So in other words, my kids' education is not, it doesn't matter to them. It doesn't matter. They don't matter.
I really appreciate you coming here again tonight and giving us your insight on this. And we're trying our best to try to find the right answer and the balance, but you bring up some points. I think it's our duty also to look to provide our school environment with the best possible safety and health. So that's a balance we're trying to find here. But to go to the next step, if you're homeschooled and then not provided any kind of resources and no ability to continue the further education, is something that I think we need as a committee to continue to look at. So again, thank you very much for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Representative Michelle.
Oh, I'm
Well,
so sorry.
don't worry. I
No,
wanted
wait. I'll let you know when everyone's done with their
I'm
questions.
sorry.
Thank you so much.
sorry about that. I just wanted to thank you. It was just a comment. Thank you for bringing emotions and very strong words, and also helping us do our due diligence here in Connecticut. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Now, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.